I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. According to Wikipedia, quote, "The Hatfield-McCoy feud involved two American families of the West Virginia-Kentucky area along the Tug Fork of the Big Sandy River from 1863 to 1891. The Hatfields of West Virginia were led by William Anderson Devil Anse Hatfield, while the McCoys of Kentucky were under the leadership of Randolph "Ol' Rannel" McCoy. Those involved in the feud were descended from Joseph Hatfield and William McCoy, born around 1750. The feud has entered the American folklore lexicon as a metonym for any bitterly feuding rival parties. The McCoy family lived primarily on the Kentucky side of the Tug Fork. The Hatfields lived mostly on the West Virginia side. The majority of the Hatfields, although living in Mingo County, then part of Logan County, fought for the Confederacy in the American Civil War. Most McCoys also fought for the Confederates, with the exception of Asa Harmon McCoy, who fought for the Union. The first real violence in the feud was the death of Asa as he returned home from the war, murdered by a group of Confederate home guards called the Logan Wildcats. Devil Anse Hatfield was a suspect at first, but was later confirmed to have been sick at home at the time of the murder. It was widely believed that his uncle, Jim Vance, a member of the Wildcats, committed the murder. The Hatfields were more affluent and had many more political connections than the McCoys. Ance's timbering operation was also a source of wealth for his family, while the McCoys were more of a lower middle-class family. Ol' Rannel owned a 300-acre farm. Both families had also been involved in the manufacturing and selling of illegal moonshine, a popular commodity at the time. Asa Harmon McCoy joined the 45th Kentucky Infantry on October 20, 1863. According to his compiled service records, he was, quote, "captured by rebels" on December 5, 1863, and was released 4 months later to a Union hospital in Maryland. At the time of his capture, he was recovering from a gunshot wound to the chest. During the early months of the Civil War, Asa joined a company of the Pike County Home Guards under the command of Uriah Runyon, and it was thought he sustained the wound while serving in this unit. William Francis also led a company of Pike County Guards until 1862, a group of which attacked and shot Mose Christian Klein, a friend of Devil Anse Hatfield. Although Klein survived his wounds, Anse vowed to retaliate against the responsible parties. Sometime in 1863, a group of Confederate Home Guards ambushed and killed Francis as he was leaving his house, and Anse took credit for the deed. Runyon later joined the 39th Kentucky Infantry and was killed on May 7, 1864, in Pike County, Kentucky. His compiled service records say killed by rebels. On muster rolls beginning on May 6, 1864, Asa is reported in a Lexington hospital, suffering from a leg fracture beginning in December 1864. The 45th Kentucky Infantry began mustering its companies out of service. Asa's Company E was mustered out on December 24, 1864, in Ashland. He was killed near his home on January 7, 1865, just 13 days after leaving the Union Army. A group of Confederate guerrillas took credit for the killing, and his wife's pension application states that he was, quote, "killed by rebels." There are no existing records pertaining to his death, and no warrants were issued in connection with the murder. McCoy family tradition points to James "Jim" Vance, an uncle of Anse, and a member of a West Virginia militia group, as the culprit. The second recorded instance of violence in the feud occurred 13 years later, in 1878, after a dispute about the ownership of a hog. Floyd Hatfield, a cousin of Anse, owned the hog, but Randolph McCoy claimed it was his, saying that the notches on the pig's ears were McCoy, not Hatfield marks. The matter was taken to the local justice of the peace, Anderson Preacher Anse Hatfield, who ruled in favor of the Hatfields by the testimony of Bill Staton, a relative of both families. In June 1880, Staton was killed by two McCoy brothers, Sam and Paris, who were later acquitted on the grounds of self-defense. The feud escalated after Rosanna McCoy entered a relationship with Devil Ance's son Johnson, known as Johnsy, leaving her family to live with the Hatfields in West Virginia. Rosanna eventually returned to the McCoys, but when the couple tried to resume their relationship, Johnsy was arrested by the McCoys on outstanding Kentucky bootlegging warrants. He was freed from McCoy custody only when Rosanna made a desperate midnight ride to alert Ance, who organized a rescue party. The Hatfield party surrounded the McCoys and took Johnsy back to West Virginia before he could be transported the next day to the county seat in Pikeville. Despite what was seen as her betrayal of her own family on his behalf, Johnsy therefore abandoned the pregnant Rosanna for her cousin Nancy McCoy, whom he wed in 1881. The feud continued in 1882 when Ellison Hatfield, brother of Ance, was killed by three of Rosanna's younger brothers, Tolbert, Famer, and Bud. On an election day in Kentucky, the three McCoy brothers fought a drunken Ellison and another Hatfield brother. Ellison was stabbed 26 times and finished off with a gunshot. The McCoy brothers were initially arrested by Hatfield's constables and were taken to Pikeville for trial. Secretly, Ance organized a large group of vigilantes and intercepted the constables and their McCoy prisoners before they reached Pikeville. The brothers were taken by force to West Virginia. When Ellison died from his injuries, all three McCoy brothers were killed by the Hatfields in turn. They were tied to pawpaw bushes, and each was shot numerous times, with a total of 50 shots fired. Their bodies were described as bullet-riddled. Soon another McCoy, the second son of the murdered Asa, named Lark McCoy, was ambushed by an alleged West Virginia posse led by the Hatfields. Even though the Hatfields and most inhabitants of the area believed their revenge was warranted, up to about 20 men, including Ance, were indicted. All of the Hatfields eluded arrest. This angered the McCoy family, who took the cause up with Perry Cline. Upon hearing of the meeting, Ance resolved to stop Randall and sent gunmen to ambush Randall and his son Calvin, but the gunmen killed Randall's nephews, John and Henderson Scott, instead, after mistaking them for their targets. Cline, who was Martha McCoy's brother, is believed to have used his political connections to reinstate the charges and announce rewards for the Hatfields' arrests, as an act of revenge. A few years prior, Cline had lost a lawsuit against Ance over the deed of thousands of acres of land, subsequently increasing the hatred between the two families. Days after the killing of the Scotts, acting constable Cap Hatfield and family friend Tom Wallace broke into the house of Bill Daniels and flogged his wife Mary, sister of Jeff McCoy, who they suspected of warning her brother's family of danger. Jeff McCoy heard of the whipping in 1886 while on the run for the murder of mail carrier Fred Wolford. Infuriated, he and his friend Josiah Hurley set out to capture Tom Wallace and take him to jail in Pikeville, but he escaped them. As Jeff tried to flee, he was shot dead by Cap and Wallace on the banks of the Tug Fork. Two other McCoys, Jake and Larkin, once again attempted to arrest Tom Wallace for the assault on Mary Daniels in August 1887, but he managed to escape from jail. He was found murdered the following year, likely by the McCoys. Lark McCoy was the second son of the murdered Asa McCoy. He too was ambushed and murdered by an alleged West Virginia posse led by the Hatfields. The feud reached its peak during the 1888 New Year's Night Massacre. Cap and Vance led several members of the Hatfields clan to surround the McCoy cabin and opened fire on the sleeping family. Awakened by the shooting, the McCoys managed to grab their weapons and fired back. The cabin was then set on fire in an effort to drive the McCoys out into the open. Panicking, the McCoys rushed to every exit they could find. Randolph managed to escape and hide inside the pig pen. Most of his children managed to escape into the woods. Two of Randolph's children, Calvin and Alifair, were shot and killed near the family well as they exited the home. Randolph's wife Sarah was caught, beaten, and almost killed by Vance and Johnsy. With his house burning, Randolph and his remaining family members were able to escape further into the wilderness. His children, unprepared for the elements, suffered frostbite. The remaining McCoys moved to Pikeville to escape the West Virginia raiding parties. Between 1880 and 1891, the feud claimed more than a dozen members of the two families. On one occasion, the governors of West Virginia and Kentucky even threatened to have their militias invade each other's states. In response, Kentucky Governor S.B. Buckner sent his Adjutant General, Sam Hill, to Pike County to investigate the situation. A few days after the New Year's massacre, a posse led by Pike County Deputy Sheriff Frank Phillips rode out to track down Ance's group across the state line into West Virginia. 2 McCoys were members of Phillips' posse, Bud and one of Randolph's sons, Jim. The posse's first victim was Vance, who was killed in the woods after he refused to be arrested. Phillips then made other successive raids on Hatfield homes and supporters, capturing many and killing another 3 Hatfield supporters, before cornering the rest in Grapevine Creek on January 19th. Unfortunately for Phillips, Ance and other Hatfields were waiting for them with an armed group of their own. A battle ensued between the 2 parties, and the Hatfields were eventually apprehended. A deputy, Bill Dempsey, was wounded and executed by Frank Phillips after they surrendered. On August 24, 1888, 8 of the Hatfields and their friends were indicted for the murder of Randolph's young daughter Alifair McCoy, who was killed during the New Year's massacre. They included Cap Johnsey, Robert and Elliot Hatfield, Ellison Mounts, French Ellis, Charles Gillespie, and Thomas Chambers. Because of the issues of due process and illegal extradition, the United States Supreme Court became involved. The Supreme Court ruled 7-2 in favor of Kentucky, holding that even if a fugitive is returned from the asylum state illegally instead of through lawful extradition procedure, no federal law prevents him from being tried. Eventually, the men were tried in Kentucky and all were found guilty. 7 received life imprisonment, while the 8th, Ellison Cotton-Top Mounts, was executed by hanging and buried in an unmarked grave within sight of the gallows. Ellison had tried to retract his confession, stating that he was innocent, that he had only confessed because he expected leniency, but his retraction was denied. Thousands attended his hanging in Pikeville, but though the scaffold was in the open, the base was fenced in to comply with the laws that had been passed which prohibited public executions. The hanging site was in current location of a classroom building of the present-day University of Pikeville. With his last words, Ellison claimed that, quote, "The Hatfields made me do it," end quote. No one had been sent to the gallows in Pike County for 40 years, and after Ellison, no one was ever again. Fighting between the families eased following the hanging of Mounts. Trials continued for years until the 1901 trial of Johnsey, who was sentenced to life imprisonment for his involvement in the New Year's massacre, in the last day of the Feud trials. On June 14, 2003, in Pikeville, Kentucky, the McCoy cousins partnered with Rio Hatfield of Waynesboro, Virginia, to declare an official truce between the families. Rio Hatfield said that he wanted to show that if the 2 families could reach an accord, others could also. He had said that he wanted to send a broader message to the world, that when national security is at risk, Americans put their differences aside and stand united. Quote, "We're not saying you don't have to fight because sometimes you do have to fight," he said, "but you don't have to fight forever," end quote. Signed by more than 60 descendants during the 4th Hatfield McCoy Festival. The truce was touted as a proclamation of peace, saying, quote, "We ask by God's grace and love that we be forever remembered as those that bound together the hearts of 2 families to form a family of freedom in America," end quote. Governor Paul E. Patton of Kentucky and Governor Bob Wise of West Virginia signed proclamations declaring June 14th Hatfield and McCoy Reconciliation Day. Ron McCoy, one of the festival's founders, said it is unknown where the 3 signed proclamations will be exhibited, and that the Hatfields and McCoys symbolize violence and feuding and fighting. But by signing this, hopefully people will realize that's not the final chapter. End quote.
Watch out, cause I'm here now and I'm staying. Claws out, this the fight that I've been craving. I know there's something inside of me, but it's been masked by fear and anxiety. But no more, I'ma break out of the chains. Let's defiantly. Go! I'm waking up, this ain't enough. All of my dreams were starting to rust, but I believe that I can adjust. Positive thoughts, I'm starting to trust. Nothing's deserved unless you work. Something of worth requires an urge. I have been hurt by those at their worst, but that gave me will, some power, a surge. And they know that I won't surrender, so they fear me as a contender. When I fight they always remember, yeah. I will be known, I won't let go, I will not stop, I will be great. I will be known, I won't let go, I will not stop, I will be great. 'Cause we came here to conquer, fighting like we're monsters. We can last much longer, 'cause we do this for honor. We came here to conquer, fighting like we're monsters. And we can last much longer, 'cause we do this for honor. I am a hunter, I've been filled with demons and hunger. I am the thunder, I command the masses in numbers. Look at the fear in their eyes, this is what happens when you are surprised. It's time to meet your demise, just call me Zeus and look to the sky. Everything's amplified, no they cannot deny, I will be rectified. If you dissect me, find scars that you left behind, injuries that define me to my core. They'll hear me roar like never before, the pain I absorbed, it's feeding my core. I'm hard to ignore, I'll beat down your door. If you wanted war, well then you got war. And they know that I won't surrender, so they fear me as a contender. When I fight they always remember, yeah. I will be